Lately, the world seems quite absurd. AI is playing mind games with us, systems are collapsing overnight. And so many of us are experiencing a crisis of trust, of not knowing what to believe in anymore. In mythology, when a society becomes too rigid or corrupt, an interesting figure arrives to burn it down and to challenge the status quo. This video is about an archetype in a story that I believe perfectly fits the sort of absurd movie that we are witnessing on the collective stage right now, which is the archetype of the trickster. Carl Jung called the trickster the collective shadow of humanity. It's a type of energy that is untamed. It tends to break our masks and brings back authenticity. We may all know different trickster types from stories, such as Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland, Gollum in Lord of the Rings. But the trickster is not just a figure in a story or a fairy tale. It's part of the collective unconscious, and so it has a tendency to manifest in our real world reality in pretty destructive ways. These days, there seems to be a worldwide fascination with scandal, with trickery, with the grand schemes. But what is it that we find so fascinating about these types, or even haunting? While there are some very dark trickster figures in this world, the archetype itself is usually neither good nor completely evil. Its primary function is to cross boundaries, break taboos, and expose hypocrisy. It thrives in the in-between, the gray zone between dark and light, truth and deception, and order and chaos. You could say that their morality is somewhat fluid, but interestingly, their actions often lead to unexpected, unintended consequences. To me, the story that shows best the nature of the trickster archetype is Hans Christian Andersen's The Emperor's New Clothes. You may know the story. It's about a vain emperor that is obsessed with his image. He hires two schemers who pretend to weave magnificent clothes that are invisible to anyone stupid. And the emperor, who does not see the clothes, fears he will seem foolish. So he praises the empty air and parades completely naked through the streets. And everybody applauds his magnificence until finally a child shouts the truth. He has no clothes on. And in that exact moment, the collective fear shifts and the illusion shatters. The weavers in the story are masters of deception. They use the vanity and fear of the emperor against him. And yet their actions, even if they are dark, bring light to a collective fantasy. They completely shatter an illusion. And so while tricksters may not mean to be, they often end up being a catalyst for transformation. And that is because most tricksters in stories, as well as real world tricksters, have a counter archetype attached to them that acts as a catalyst for their downfall. And that archetype is the child. In a fairy tale, the child spoke the truth. It didn't have any fear of any repercussions. It didn't have any agendas. It wasn't fearful of any judgment. It acted on observation and pure truth. The child archetype represents innocence, purity, and clarity. It often appears in moments when the veil of trickery needs to fall. And while at the moment some of those darkest tricksters are being revealed, we see child archetypes everywhere across the world speaking their truth that are ultimately collapsing the system. But the trickster isn't just one thing. We can see it on the world stage, but it also has other forms, such as the human ego. If we look inside, we may find the trickster in our own inner shadowland. It's a part that lives in many of us. In a way, just like in the fairy tale, it preys on our fears. It thrives on our low self-esteem and our deep need for belonging. Psychologically speaking, you could say that we live in our own bubble, and our ego creates this bubble to keep us safe. And this bubble stays intact until somebody or something challenges it. I like to call the ego our inner trickster because it likes to play games with our minds. It adores surface level peace, even if that peace comes at a cost of truth. It loves to justify our own self-betrayals. And that is because the ego's aim is always survival, not self-awareness. And so you may ask, why are we usually not aware of this inner trickster? Why are we blind to it? And that is because as long as we are comfortable in any way, the ego tends to control the narrative. It would rather live in a beautiful lie than an ugly truth. But this false peace eventually comes at a cost. A suppressed trickster within our inner shadowlands has a tendency to eventually turn against us. And it can, for example, externalize as anxiety, self-sabotage, or a slow and gradual loss of integrity. When this inner trickster gets woken up, which often happens through crisis or extreme challenge, it tends to become a bit of a disruptor in your life, which brings me to what I like to call the trickster's ultimate play. I've observed a lot of times that if our inner trickster is too strong, and when we live too much in a state of illusion, lying to ourselves or betraying ourselves, sacrificing ourselves maybe for something that is not authentic to who we are, sometimes the external world or the universe itself can in a way step in to act as a trickster. And that is because the mind is so vulnerable to manipulation that sometimes a massive force is needed to shatter the ego, to allow the soul beneath to come through. Some people call that a dark night of the soul. But whatever you may call it, it usually happens when we've lost ourselves too much in a path that is not true to who we are. So whether you face the trickster on a world scale, on a personal scale, or a universal scale, how do we face the trickster and how do we survive this trickster world? I believe that the solution to the trickster might be the archetype of a child. The child archetype is in its essence like the soul. It is pure and its language is truth. If we connect to the child archetype, that innocent part within all of us isn't burdened by societal pressure. It can look at a broken system and say, you have no clothes on. But how do you channel the child archetype? In the fairy tale, the child is fearless in a way because it hasn't been brainwashed yet. It doesn't fear judgment or social exclusion. I believe worldwide right now we are in a way in the moment right after the child shouts, you have no clothes on. The elites are falling. Some of our systems and institutions are showing their true colors, and some of our bigger tricksters are facing their downfall. And so I believe that we are at the moment in this unique position in history. For one, because we get to witness the live unraveling of type of trickster archetype on a collective stage. We get to see and witness the mask falling, but we also get to dominate what archetype will define the next era. Will it be a different version of the trickster archetype, like the villain or the shadow king? Or will it be something that we actually can trust and believe in? I think we're in a place where we are very vulnerable to fall back into an old pattern. And with everything that is happening, it's very easy to feel jaded, to just want to shut down and be left alone. If the next era should be guided by the child archetype, it would be an era where we likely stop accepting just because it's always been done that way. It might be a time where we ask whether or not something is truly helping or only helping some, whether something is built on truth rather than something that looks good or just a well-packaged and articulated lie. The thing is, leaning into the child archetype is not easy. While it is a beautiful energy, a strong energy, pure, innocent, and driven by a curious fearlessness, our world, unfortunately, is not necessarily benevolent towards child archetypes. Society, unfortunately, has a tendency to reject it and see it as weak or naive. And so it takes bravery to claim it. But I believe that it's one of the few archetypes that can actually make a difference in this world. We all have to face tricksters at some point of our lives, and it usually dunks us right into the underworld. Externally, their job is to be a catalyst to transformation, a type of absurd energy that challenges the status quo and wakes us all up to change and transform. And while that may be scary, facing the external trickster archetypes can lead us to a type of truth and clarity that we may have never experienced before. And if we are brave enough to face our inner tricksters, we may surprisingly find our most true and authentic selves, possibly a self that is unburdened by invisible clothes.